So here we are. And the program for today is to talk about two things: the personality and the felt sense. And the ego and the personality are used interchangeably. But basically, the ego is kind of our thoughts, feelings, our self-concept, our beliefs, and how we feel about the world. A big piece in that is our self-concept, and that's kind of what we have some choice in. Now, our genetics, which is part of our personality, we don't really have a lot of choice in. But awareness helps us with all of that, right? So we're going to delve into that. And I got to be a total geek and do my research of the personality and go into Freud and Jung and all that. And I had a blast doing it. So I'm very excited to talk about that. And then someone recently asked me, Jane, you always talk about the felt sense. What is the felt sense? And I was like, ay. The felt sense is basically the physical place where our body knows. So there's a knowingness in our body. And as you know, this is a somatic approach to meditation. And to me, the body is much more, Amazon's here. The body is much more stable than the mind. The mind, as we know, just jumps from thought to thought to thought, and you get lost down one rabbit hole and it goes to another. The body, on the other hand, is more genuine. It doesn't get caught up in inflation or deflation. It just is. And so there's a purity to the body, and it's accessible. And to me, it's like there are two resources, I think, that are so underutilized. One is the body and one is nature. The other is nature. I mean, those two, if we would just be in nature and we would feel our own divine nature within our body, life would be a lot simpler, right? So that's what we're going to do today, is we're going to sink into that felt sense, and we're going to explore our ego with kindness and see how our ego can be a servant of our higher self, and how our head can serve our heart. That's really what it's all about. So I'm going to start by bringing us into a short meditation. So if y'all want to get comfortable and get where your back is supported. I don't talk about posture a lot, but I'm going to talk a little bit about posture today. The most important part of a meditation posture is simply that your spine is straight. Now, some people don't want to lean against everything. They sit on a cushion and they have that kind of back. Not me. I need to rest against something, and many people do. So let yourself get comfortable where your spine is supported and where it can be straight. And you'll notice, for example, you don't want to be ramrod straight. The breath is always moving and the body is always moving subtly. You know, sometimes people go into this frozen state of meditation. That is so not what we want. We want the body to be alive and fluid and moving, and thinking of the breath as liquid moving through liquid. So there's a flow. So get your spine nicely supported and feel your lower body also so that it's stable. It's your base. Some people like to sit cross-legged. You can sit in a chair, however you feel stable, and feel your connection to the earth. Imagine you could just plug your feet into the earth, and you could feel that earth energy and feel it pushing back. The earth pushes back, it meets you, and it holds you. Let yourself be held. And feel your body begin to relax. And I want you, if you could put your hands on your rib cage, and feel your rib cage expand. It's going to look like this. Feel your rib cage expand sideways as you inhale. And feel it come in, back, and down as you exhale, squeezing out that last little bit of air. Inhaling out and exhaling in. And notice how when your rib cage expands out, it creates more room for your breath. Your lungs can fill up more. You can feel your scapula begin to glide down your back. And feel your shoulders kind of release. And again, feel free to move. Feel the breath filling up and expanding the spine, vertebra by vertebra, creating space within each vertebra on the inhale. And on the exhale, relaxing into that space. And you can put your hands down now. Your rib cage knows what to do. And just continue breathing from that expanded rib cage. Today, we'll be exploring the personality, and where the personality shows up in terms of the body the most is the face, the head, neck, and shoulders. So we're going to focus a little bit on relaxing your head to begin with. I want you to release the hinge of your jaw so that your molars don't touch. And feel your head as if it is movable. It's not fixed or solid. It has space to move like plates of the earth. And breathe into your brain and into your head, feeling it expand with the inhale and relax into that space on the exhale. Feel your brain shift to the back of your head. Feel its weight in the back of your head. And the force of gravity drawing you down, feeling your shoulders drop. Inviting the tiny muscles in and around your eyes to melt. Even your eyeballs melt like liquid pools. Bringing your awareness behind your eyes to the optic nerve and feel that relax. Let your eyes simply melt. Feel the muscles in your face melt. And imagine your neck like a rope being drenched with warm water and feeling it unwind softly. And your shoulders drop even more. And feel your breath come all the way up from your belly, all the way up to your head like a wave, creating space in your shoulder joints, in the joints in your neck. Feel that wave moving through your body, rising and falling. Feel your tongue rest on the floor of your mouth, and even your gums and teeth melt. Your scalp just hangs on your skull. Your chest softens. And imagine you could open up the pores of your skin and drink in fresh, revitalizing oxygen and energy. Drinking it in every pore. Let your exhale extend so that it's longer than your inhale, turning on the calming part of your nervous system. Breathing all the way down into your pelvic floor, down into your legs and your feet, and all the way up to the top of your head. Feel your whole body breathing. Feel yourself being breathed. And thoughts come up, and you simply just notice the sensations in your body. Coming home to the body, finding, in fact, scanning to see if there's a particular place in your body that feels particularly delicious. Let yourself rest there. Let that area of deliciousness expand and expand. Not pushing, just allowing. And just notice your inner state of your body at this moment. Notice where the energy is moving, where it's free, and where it's not. I'm not trying to change anything, but just being aware. And then very gradually, we're going to shift, and you're going to continue this breathing. And I'm going to give a little talk about the ego, the personality, and I invite you to listen with your body. Your mind too, but that wisdom in your body is really what we want to activate here, that part of you that knows. That felt sense, which is called the body within the body. And so feel free to self-regulate. You can keep your eyes closed. You can have them in a soft focus if you like. Or you can open them, whichever feels good to you. It's your body. So the ego, the personality. Now, if we were to look inside your brain or my brain or anybody's brain, we would not find a place that's called the self. There is no one area of the brain where the I exists. The I is really a concept, a self-concept that we each create, and it's born of habit, genetics, behavior. And so becoming more aware of that, you have more choice around it. So the personality encompasses all our thoughts, our behavior plans, our social attitudes, how we see ourselves, how we see the world, and what we believe. A lot of the personality is formed by the self-concept, the set of perceptions and beliefs about ourselves. That's a biggie. Now, a lot of the personality is kind of geared toward the outside world. The word personality comes from the Latin root word persona, which is a mask that performers wore. So it's the mask we wear in the world, our persona. It isn't who we are, but oftentimes we've come to identify this mask as who we are. And thus we begin to lose touch with our deeper inner being, our true nature, our beingness. And that's a problem. That's where we get a little lost. So in terms of the personality, you've got this behaviors, thoughts, feelings, self-concept, and then there's the ego. Now, the ego you could call the pivot point of the personality. It's kind of the decider. The ego says, I'm going to do this, and I'm that. And it's a mediator. It mediates between the world and yourself and your unconscious. And so it serves as a function. Now, what happens is we begin to identify as our ego, and it'd be like identifying with your colon. You know, I have a colon, it has a function, but I'm not my colon. But that's kind of what happens to us. We get a little mixed up there, and we identify rather than this vast beingness that knows no bounds of our true nature, of who we truly are. So where did this all begin? Well, you knew I was going to come back to Freud, right? So we're going to go back to Sigmund Freud, who lived in the Victorian era in Austria. And Freud originally was a neurologist. He was dissecting brains. And he was a smart guy. He spoke 7 languages, one of which was English. And a lot of his theories came from reading Shakespeare. So interesting how art and science come together in that. And he was very interested in philosophy and the human condition. And his theories really started the whole psychoanalytic movement. And his theory started with the unconscious and the conscious. And he described it as like an iceberg. You have this big iceberg that's under the ocean and a little tip that's sticking out. That little tip is the ego, and that's what's conscious. Everything else is unconscious. We're not aware of it. It's operating, but we're not even aware of it. Within that unconscious, there are 2 parts, the id and the superego. The id are our drives and our pleasure principle, kind of the wild part of us. Now, in Freud's time, sexuality was very repressed. And, Freud was a bit hung up on sex. So for him, it was like, okay, this sexuality, boy, we better keep it under grips. We better keep it under tame. And that was the ego's job. The ego was to kind of tamp down on the id and also to be the mediator between the id and the superego. And the superego were kind of like all the beliefs that were part of the morality of that time. So it had to do with your religious beliefs. And some of them were conscious, like religious beliefs, like thou shalt not kill, but some of them were unconscious. Like a woman walks like this, a woman behaves like this. Now, when I think of those poor women, they couldn't even breathe. They were wearing corsets. How did they even know what they felt? And they were all tied in. And so one of the things that Jung discovered was that a lot of the problems people had then had to do with their problems with trauma or unconscious complexes. So at that time, women in particular experienced something called hysteria. Now, it's not like hysteria, like, hysteria could be one part of your body, like your arm would be like this and it wouldn't move. And this was like rampant. All these people with like one arm that wouldn't move. What he discovered was when he could dig into the unconscious and release those traumas through the talking cure, the arm would move again. The energy would flow and people would come back into health. So that was a huge deal because there were all these people that had mental illness and they had asylums back then that were stuck. So Freud had a huge part in freeing people up and in the mental health world in general. So the other part of the ego was that the ego controlled things. It was like, I control the id, I control the ego. That's the main part of us. That's our ego. It's the one that's in control. Now then came his little tribe. He had a tribe of 10 or 11 other psychoanalysts, and we're going to look at 4 of them. The second one was Jung, Carl Jung. Now Jung believed that the organizing principle of the psyche wasn't the ego, it was the self with a capital S, the spiritual component. That a spiritual component, that which is bigger than us, that's wise, knowing, and loving, was the center of our psyche. And Freud didn't like that. They had a breakup over that very thing. So Freud is hugely responsible for transpersonal psychology and bringing the spiritual as part of an intrinsic part of who we are, the essence of who we are. Now, one of the things that Jung did, which was not well known, is that Bill W. of the 12-step program came to Carl Jung and said, Dr. Jung, I'm starting this AA group, Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm not having a problem. It's not working. And so Jung said, well, Bill W., the answer's right in front of you. What's the root word of alcohol? Spiritus. And he said, Bill W., you need to bring a spiritual component into AA in order for it to work. These people are drinking because they're trying to find a spiritual expansion. They're trying to expand, but the way they're doing isn't working. Bring the spiritual into it and it'll work. And sure enough, that became the higher power of the 12-step program. Now, one thing about Jung is he also had this sense of nature. He was a camper. Every summer, he'd take his kids and he'd camp for an entire summer. And he wrote a book called The Earth Has a Soul. And he believed that modern day, our biggest problem was our disconnect from the feminine. That until we brought in the feminine, and I don't mean gender, I mean the feminine, the receptivity, the openness, the body, nature, that we were in trouble. And I think he's right. I think that's a big part of why we are in trouble. So Jung's kind of contribution was essentially spirituality is at the center, and ego is just one part of the whole deal. Ego helped mediate between the unconscious and the conscious, so that if you had a dream, you didn't wake up and wonder, did that really happen? Your ego was grounded in, everyday reality and knew it didn't. And then the third one that I'm going to talk about is Wilhelm Reich. Now, he was quite an interesting guy, and he was the father of somatic psychology. So Wilhelm Reich looked at the energy body, and his whole belief was your body, your personality, everything is part of an energy system, like chi. And if your chi is blocked or disrupted, you're going to have illness in your mind or in your body. And he was like, you know what we all need to do to make this world a healthier place? Have more orgasms. So he was all about the orgasm, and that was basically the most freeing thing that we could do for our body, and that many of our ills in the world would be healed if we had more orgasms. So he decided, you're right. I mean, the guy had a lot of wisdom, right? You couldn't go to CVS and just get a bottle of orgasm, right? But that's essentially what he tried to do. He created an orgone collector. And this collector collected energy or units of orgone. Orgone came from your energy body, from the earth, from weather, and from orgasm. And so he had this orgone collector, and he would have people, he'd collect the energy and have people sit in the middle of it and just have them drink in this energy. So people didn't like this. This was Victorian times. And so he was booted out of Norway in, I think it was 39, because of it. And he went to the US, and he was doing his thing in the US and selling his little organ collectors and being a proponent of orgasm and looking at the energy body. And he was told that the FDA was going to take all his orgone collectors away from him. So they did. They confiscated them all except for one. And that one, a buddy of his had. When the FDA found out that one orgone collector was still around, they put Wilhelm Reich in prison. And so get this, he was in prison and died in prison. All because of these taboos around sexuality and the body. Kind of mind-blowing, isn't it? So when you look at all these theories together, kind of what you see is, okay, we have the spiritual center, we have the ego center of kind of like the director of the personality, and then we have the energy body. And they all have their place in this wonderful psyche of ours. But what happens is they've gotten distorted. Most of psychology is ego psychology or personality psychology, and they just look at what personality traits do you have. And it's kind of all about making your ego and your personality a little bit more comfortable. I've heard it referred to as psychology is about rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. That we don't really get into the big questions of what is life? What is this sense of aliveness? How do we feel more alive? It's just about, how do I make more money? How do I look good to my friends or whatever? It's a little bit more superficial. Now, we all have a personality and we all have an ego. And remember, the ego serves a function. And so when we have a weak ego, that's not good. Or if we have an inflated ego, think of Donald Trump as the most inflated ego around, right? You just want to take a pin and pop it. So anyway, the ego, we want to find what in AA they call the right size ego. What's right size? I think of right size as it's kind of neutral. It just does its job. It puts its ego hat on, it takes care of business, then it takes it off and it goes inside and feels its depth and its juiciness and its energy and spirituality. But a lot of us think of ego as, oh, we try to kill the ego. Oh, I want to let go of my ego. Good luck. We need an ego to function in the world. What if we went around and we had no sense of I, no self-reference? I mean, it's like, remember when Prince had that, he got rid of his name and had a symbol? How can you self-reference? We have to have an I and a you and a me so that's what we want. Now, I have this quote I'm going to read you because I think it's such a fabulous explanation of what a healthy ego is. This is by Robert Thurman, who's a Buddhist scholar. And he says, the ego or self becomes clarified in the sense that it is no longer experienced as a solid, rigid, ever-present entity, but rather as a transparent, elastic, vibratory activity. It loses its thingness. We realize that it is a verb, not a noun, a wave, not a particle. The sense of self, your ego, becomes flexible rather than a prison. You can come and go freely. Yay. That's a healthy ego. It's flexible. It's connected to your body. It's connected to all of you. And it's a representative, but it isn't you. And that's where we get in trouble. So a healthy ego is capable of surrender. A healthy ego can surrender to the heart's wisdom, to the spiritual wisdom, and it knows, I'm only this bit of, I only have this much, I'm just a representative, but I want to sense into my deeper true nature, the part of me that knows, that's wise, that's clear, that's loving. And so it can do that. It serves the higher self. So the question is, how do we let go of the ego? Well, there are many ways, but what we're going to look at today is coming back to the breath. When our ego is in charge and our ego is kind of raging or doing whatever it is in an unhealthy way, you will feel a rigidity in your body. You will feel some sort of stuckness. We talked about the energy body and how it has to flow. And when it's in flow, we're in flow. But when your personality gets in there, say you're feeling really great and you're in a group of people and you're feeling on your game, and then you get self-conscious and your ego gets in there and suddenly that flow stops. You feel self-conscious, you get a little awkward, you start to doubt yourself. That's a perfect example. And so easy, instead of going, well, am I an asshole? Was I an asshole? Instead of like questioning with your mind, you just go, where do I feel that stuckness in my body? And then you just go there and you exhale. And then you come home to that luscious, delicious body that's the wave, that's the water, and you let yourself breathe. You let yourself surrender. So I know it sounds easy, but it isn't. But it all takes practice, like any skill. And it is a skill. It really is. Most of our ego and our personality is simply habits. I have a habit of doing this, or you define yourself. I'm Jane and I do this, but I don't do that. I live here, but I don't like that. All these preferences that we get to see as ourselves when really we're a living, breathing, changing entity. Continual change. That's the one constant, is continual change. But we get stuck. So what we're going to look at next, and then we're going to go into a meditation and practice this, is the felt sense. So the felt sense is the physical place where you go in the body, where the body knows. The body's wisdom is right there, right with you, clear. Now, you might say, well, I feel emotions in my body. That's true. Emotions are a little bit more surface. Say you're angry and you feel like, you get a mat on, right? And you feel heat, you feel tight. And so you feel that emotion, cool, that's good. But what's beneath it? And so you go a little subtler and you feel into that and you realize, there's sadness. And then you feel into the quality with your senses. It's not thinking. If you're thinking, you're not in the felt sense. And you feel a heaviness. Maybe it's a heaviness in your chest. And so you let yourself go to your chest and you just befriend and hang out with that heaviness. And gradually it reveals itself. And it's like, oh, I'm disappointed. I'm deeply disappointed. And then it's like, okay, it was what's underneath that disappointment. Maybe there's a feeling of abandonment. Maybe you've never felt really met, or in your childhood, there was a way in which you were just left, abandoned. So you go down, we've talked about layers, but we haven't talked about the felt sense. So what we know about the felt sense is it's in the body and it can't be forced. It's kind of like going to sleep. You can't force yourself to go to sleep. The felt sense is the same way. You hang out with it, you're patient. Maybe it's kind of fuzzy, maybe it's uncomfortable and you're like, oh, I don't want to be here. Let's go to an answer. But no, be patient, hang with it, just hang with it. Give it your breath. Let the breath give it space. And eventually it reveals itself. And usually it reveals itself in kind of a gestalt. It's not like, oh, here's a little bit, here's a little tidbit. It reveals itself in like a knowing, a gestalt of knowing. And it's like clunk. Oh yeah, I know. And then often there's a feeling of like, woohoo, I got it. An example for me that I could give from my own life of felt sense is painting. And as some of you know, I'm an abstract painter. And I started painting about 5 years ago. And basically a girlfriend just said, here's some oil paint, here's some wax, and just play around with it. And so I'm like, whoa, showing me a little bit of that, but I had no color theory. I had no composition. I didn't know what I was doing. I was like a child finger painting. But what I did have was this sense of, I don't like that, or I like that. And then I found a lot of times I'd go to bed and I'd wake up with, oh yeah, this green needs to be softened with the blue, or I need to put a line there. And I had no idea how I knew or why I knew, but it was a felt sense. And then gradually I started taking classes, and then it was like my superego came in. Oh, no, blue and green don't go together. That you need a complement. And then it was like, uh-oh, where did that just instinctual knowing go? And so I had to learn how to mediate, right? Get the critical ego or the superego to like feel my felt sense first and support that, but not take over, or I'd lose my creative, vibe. So anyway, that's kind of how the felt sense works. And it's a deep listening and it's a knowing. And when we know, we know, right? You say, I know it in my gut, because you do. And so one other thing I'm going to mention between emotion and felt sense. A lot of people think, well, if you want to release emotion, you need it to make it intense. You need to get dramatic. You need to, it's not really true. The emotion is more on the surface and that energy is powerful. But if you can go to the subtler layers beneath and move that energy, then what happens is that energy moves and discharges, and you're able to tolerate more energy. Some people will be, oh, that's too intense. I'm not going to do that. Ooh, I don't want to feel that. I'm just going to dissociate and not feel that. But really what we want is we want an energy system that is wide, that we can feel full and a lot of aliveness and handle a lot of energy. And by going to those subtler layers and discharging, we can do that. So anyway, enough of my blah, blah, blah. Any questions, thoughts before we move into our meditation? And I have no idea what time it is.
Hey, I just want to say that was wonderful, Jane. Laura and I took off our video because there are some storms here and the reception was a little iffy. So that's what we did there. But I did want to say, I love what you said about right sizing the ego, because I've been meditating forever. And a lot of my training or indoctrination was ego destruction. And that actually doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, or why am I in this world? So I thought that was really powerful, that Thurman quote. And yeah, I just took that in a lot. That right sizing ego, I just want to say, made a lot of sense of how to be in the world, because we are. So it doesn't make sense to have ego destruction. So
right,
thank you.
Destroy the ego, and it's like, huh? Then what am I going to do? Just this blob? in the world. So thank you. So let's go ahead and let's meditate and let's play with the felt sense, shall we? So if you can get comfortable again where your spine's supported, and bringing your attention inward. Connecting with your breath. Feeling your rib cage expand sideways as you inhale. Feeling the rib cage come in, back, and down as you extend your exhale so it's nice and long. Creating space. And just sensing into your body. Noticing how your breath is moving, where it moves easily, where it moves not so easily. Breathing down into your feet. Feel where your feet meet the ground. Feeling the support, the pushback of the earth holding you. Feeling that same matter as your matter, your bones, your flesh, same as the earth. Here we are breathing the same air as the plants, the animals. Feeling that interconnectedness, that interbeing. Your body is this organism. It's part of the whole. Again, relaxing your brain as if it were a muscle. You could just let it go. Scanning your body for a moment and just noticing where in your body you feel most comfortable. If you had to hang out somewhere, this is where you'd want to be. And let yourself rest there. Feel the motion of your breath moving through you like a wave. And just like the waves of the ocean, each wave isn't the same. You're not going to try to make them the same. You just allow the waves to rise and fall naturally. Let yourself pause after the exhale. Just linger there a moment. And then take your inhale when you're ready. Feel the breath expand your spine, each vertebra creating more space. If you have any joints that ever give you a problem, let's take a moment and breathe space into those joints. Recognizing that our body really isn't solid. It's simply particles floating in space, and what we really are is that space. So as you breathe in space and feel your essence as this space, this spacious awareness that is wise and knowing. The very essence of your being is this spacious, wise awareness. And feel that sense of the life force inside you and notice, where does that life force feel the most powerful in your body? Could be in your fingertips. That energy of aliveness. It might feel like a heat or a shimmery quality, or like champagne bubbles. Just let yourself feel it, sensing into it. And notice how the breath can cause the entire body to be in a subtle fluid motion, and feel the motion in your body. Feel how your head kind of like bobs a little bit at the top of your neck, your cervical spine. Let it bob. Feel your back puff out against whatever you're leaning against. Let yourself wave a little bit. And scan your body to see if there are any stuck areas, any areas that might be tense or contracted. And if there are, just go to the edge of that contracted area and breathe some of that aliveness into it, some of that space. Just molecule by molecule, not forcing, just allowing. Tending to this area with kindness, tenderness. And as you breathe, notice how the diaphragm of your pelvic floor kind of puffs out and then pushes down. Notice how that same movement is in your diaphragm below your chest cavity. It puffs out and pushes down. And feel those two come into concert. The diaphragm of your pelvic floor, the diaphragm of your breathing muscle. Notice how powerful that can be if they're both in sync. And then I want you, if you would, to ask your body, not your mind, if there's anything that you're unclear about. Could be about your health, it could be about a career move, a friend, a relationship, even an art project, something that isn't quite clear. Just ask the question in an open format, not a yes or no question, but like, give me wisdom on the problem I'm having with my neck. And then I want you to let go of it. Let your body show you. And what you're going to do is you're going to sense into your body, not think about it, but feel it. Feel the sensations. And at first, it might be kind of fuzzy, not clear, might even be kind of uncomfortable. But give it space as you attend to it with kindness and patience and trust. You have everything you need inside you. You're innately wise and knowing. And so if we can just get quiet, come into our senses. Allow it to reveal itself. It might be a sense impression, a little zap of energy. Just listen. Feel. and sense. If your mind wanders, just come back to your breath, back to your question, back to your body, back to your senses. And when we pay attention to something like this, to where we feel that in the body, where that question lives in our body, it's like alchemy. That attention heats it up and allows it to cook. And it might fully cook just in this short time. But it might not. And we can return to this. We can allow ourselves to come back to it, to let it know, hey, I'm paying attention. I'm listening to you, body. I'm feeling you. And I'm patient. And it will reveal itself when it's ready. Let it have that space. And becoming aware of your whole body breathing, every cell breathing, expanding and contracting, feeling your wholeness. That spacious awareness is accommodating, has no judgment. It allows and holds every single part of ourselves. Just resting in that wholeness and the knowledge that you have everything you need inside you. Everything. And now a poem from Naguma. From the sky-like truth body, rainbow forms, bodies unfurl. Intuitively, everything is known. Natural freedom. Spontaneous presence. So when you're ready, you can gradually begin to transition back, but bringing with you this felt sense connection with your deepest truth body.